My name is Jane DeSplenter Rose. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of 3 academic advisors in the Faculty of Science. And for those of you who haven't met us before, our job is to help you sort of navigate the university system, make sure you're getting your course requirements, make sure you're on the path that you want to be on, and identify opportunities for you to develop in the way that you want to develop. Let's make the most of your time here at the university. Today we're going to be talking about pre-professional studies at the University of Regina and meeting your application requirements for your professional programs. Now, I thought I would just start by going through what you can expect today to look like. Every time I do one of these presentations, I try to change it up a little bit, add to it. My plan today is to discuss several programs that are similar in structure. So I'm going to be focusing on a variety of requirements that apply to pre-pharmacy, pre-nutrition, pre-optometry, and pre-veterinary medicine. And for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be using my examples from programs that the U of R students tend to apply to most frequently. So the University of Saskatchewan programs and the University of Waterloo for optometry. But keep in mind though, although I'm using those as my examples, the information that I'm giving you is going to be useful regardless of what institution you're applying to. Ultimately, a lot of what you need to do is learn the language that is being used so that when you apply to different institutions, you know what it is that you're looking at. So if you're interested in other institutions or other pre-professional programs that are not listed, like pre-chiropractic or pre-physical therapy, you'll still get something out of this presentation because I'm going to touch on the language and jargon that's used when discussing your application requirements. And there are common processes across the board that I'm going to be reviewing in detail. So you might be piecing it together a little bit differently, but the processes themselves are pretty common across the board. So even if the program you're applying to isn't one of my examples, you'll still get something out of this program because a lot of it is going to be more general information. And armed with that, by the time I'm done the presentation, you should be able to review the admission requirements of whatever program you intend to apply to, make a checklist, and have a pretty solid idea of how to interpret and complete those requirements in preparation for your application. I do want to spend some time on each of these, and I will. The larger structure of each of these programs is the same, which is why we've grouped them together. So I'm going to start by going through some basics, and then we'll start with pharmacy, followed by the other programs. But I encourage you to pay attention throughout because in my first example, I'll focus more on structure, and then in the subsequent sections, I'll focus more on different details. So even if I'm not speaking about your program in particular in that moment, there's likely information that I'm covering that is going to be relevant to you. Altogether, the presentation should take, I'm hoping, just over an hour. And at the end, we'll have some resources for you and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. That said, as I'm going through the presentation, you are, of course, welcome to ask questions regarding the topic that I'm talking about. So we're going to use not the chat function. We are going to use the Q&A function today. And my lovely colleagues, Haley and Kim, the other 2 advisors in the Faculty of Science, they're on the line as well. And so when you submit a question to the Q&A button, if I don't answer it live, they will answer it through the Q&A function right away for you so that you are getting some of that detailed information as we go along. So don't be scared to ask questions through that Q&A function. We do have people monitoring that, and we'll make sure that those questions get answered for you either during the course of the presentation or else at the end. We'll have an opportunity for a lot of other questions. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is your why? Why is it that you are interested in a professional program? These programs tend to be geared towards specific careers, which is a little bit more specific than most of our bachelor's degree programs. The road can be long and arduous. There are several steps along the way, and it can get fairly discouraging. So it's a good idea to think about, why do you think this is a good career path? What do you love about it? Do you have relatives in this field? Do you simply value wellness and educating others? For my pre-vet students, do you love animals? And I mean all animals, big farm animals, not just kittens and puppies. You know, if that's the case, if you're really called to these kinds of professions, that's wonderful. You're in the right place. Write this stuff down now while you're excited about it. And the reason I say that is because when you get discouraged, and there will be moments when you're discouraged, you can return to those reasons and remind you, why is it that I really wanted to do this? And they'll help get you through. Alternatively, sometimes people find that, you know, this isn't really what I want. I'm not really driven. Sometimes, you know, when I start looking at what it means to be a pharmacist or a nutritionist, that maybe this isn't really what I want to do. Maybe I don't like the work environment. My background is philosophy and psychology, and people ask me all the time, why didn't you go to law school? And it's like, I didn't want to wear a suit every day. And that sounds ridiculous, but like, honestly, I can't imagine doing that. What a nightmare for me. So you want to think about what kind of environments you'll be working in. Are you going to be on call? Is the pay adequate? Who will you be working with? Is this the right discipline you want to be in? I've had a few students contact me about pharmacy, but when I ask them about their interests, what they're really interested in is pharmacology, and that is a slightly different discipline. So you want to make sure that you're on the right path to get to where you want to be. So if you haven't done some of that research, make sure you take the next year or so and really dig in. What does this profession really look like before you dedicate, 4 to 10 years of your life to it? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the common components for an admissions application. When you identify where you want to study, most schools have an applicant information document of some kind. At the very least, it'll be on their website where they outline the detailed criteria for evaluating your admissions application. So what you want to do, the first thing you want to do is find these and make a checklist and then revisit them often because they can change from year to year. So for example, I went to the pre-vet website and they're making some changes in the coming years, and that's all included in their applicant information. And what you need to know is that if you're starting right now in your pre-professional studies, it's going to be 2 to 4 years before you apply to these schools. Their admission requirements might change. So the details of what I'm talking about today might change by the time you actually apply. So be aware of those things and check them often. Like I said, I'm going to review the basic components and what they look like, and then you'll be able to extrapolate the specifics for each school that you plan to apply to. While we're here, though, on this list, we've got 4 different common components or combinations of components that you might see in a professional application. The first is eligibility. And I'm going to take a moment and just talk about eligibility right here. Eligibility is typically based on residence. So both federally, are you a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident? And on occasion, also provincially. So have you resided in the province for however many months? Each program and each institution is going to evaluate and define these differently. Typically, applicants who are residents of the province of the institution they're applying to will have an advantage. So if there are limited seats, most of those available seats are going to be reserved for provincial residents, and only a few are going to be available to out-of-province applicants. So if you have a favored institution, check their residency requirements before you complete your undergraduate studies. That's pretty much all I'm going to say about eligibility, except I do think it's important to mention that if you are an international student working towards pre-professional studies, you definitely want to check out now what those residency requirements are. If you do need to seek permanent residency, you can look into that process now and get started. So for information and assistance with that, do contact our UR International Student Services Office. They are the experts when it comes to study permits, work permits, immigration regulations. They can certainly help you navigate those processes, and you can start some of those now so that by the time you apply, you're in the position that you will need to be in. I'm going to spend the majority of our time today on the academic requirements for each program because that's ultimately what you're working on at the University of Regina. So when I'm talking about course requirements, averages, course load, all of that is related to the academic requirements. And as I mentioned earlier, I will cover the requirements that our programs apply to most frequently. But if you're planning on applying to other programs, you'll want to check those carefully because the details might vary slightly. Academics love assessment. So there are a variety of exams that you might be required to take depending on your career projection. Some of your applications to professional programs, so some are for the application process, sorry, and some are for licensing requirements after you're finished your professional program. So the exams that I'm going to focus on today are going to be primarily the ones that are geared towards admissions applications. So for example, you don't see it here, but like for medical school, there's the MCAT. For dentistry, there's the DAT. For optometry, there's the OAT. So these are exams that you would write before you apply for admission. And then once you're finished your professional program, you would have another exam to actually be licensed with the college to practice. So just keep in mind that those things are different. I'm going to focus on the admissions exams today. And then towards the end, we have the personal evaluations. So those include interviews, references, those kinds of things. These are fairly straightforward, but sometimes the format can be a little bit strange. So I will talk a little bit about what those might look like as well. But when you're looking at your application, you should be able to break down the pieces of your application into these 4 components. So we'll talk a little bit about what those look like and how you put those together. Okay, so what is a pre-professional program? The first thing you really need to understand about pre-professional studies is this. You do not graduate with a degree in pre-pharmacy or pre-veterinary medicine. The University of Regina does not offer degree programs in pharmacy, nutrition, vet med, dentistry, optometry. We simply don't have the facilities or faculty with expertise in these specific areas. So at the University of Regina, what we are offering is a strong foundation in science, which you must understand, and you will rely upon it when you enter your professional program. So you're expected to have that strong foundation in sciences before you even apply for admission to these programs. And that's what a pre-professional program is. So each program has their own application requirements. While you're here, you'll take the required courses, do your best to maintain a competitive average. You'll also put together what I call your application portfolio. And this will include your academic records as well as your accumulated work and volunteer experiences. You'll start collecting your references and any other requirements listed for the program that you're applying to. So for example, CPR, first aid, or whatever. The stuff that I talked about before. Keeping in mind that these are the requirements that are needed to be eligible to apply to the program that you're interested in. There's no guarantee that you will meet the eligibility requirements or the academic requirements. And even if you do meet the requirements as listed by the professional program, there's no guarantee that you will be accepted. These programs are competitive in nature, and so it's always good for you to have a backup plan. And that's what we call our preparatory degree. So while you're at the University of Regina, we do have you down as working towards a pre-professional program, but you might hear us ask you, what major do you want to work towards alongside your pre-professional studies? Most professional programs do expect that you are working towards some kind of undergraduate program at the same time. And I'll talk about what that looks like, but the really nice thing is that they go together. Some programs require completion of a full degree. So medicine is a good example of that. Pre-physical therapy is another good example of that. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, those are master's level programs. So you have to complete a full undergraduate degree first. For other students, it's just a matter of you'll work towards that one, but you'll take the courses towards your professional program and we'll use those courses towards that degree. So if you don't get into your professional program for whatever reason, you can finish the degree. Alternatively, if you don't get in your first year, you can keep working towards that degree and apply again. A lot of students don't get in the first time they apply. That's absolutely normal and okay. And in a lot of cases, you need to finish 2 to 3 years worth of study. Well, if it's 3 years before you can even apply, a lot of students will take advantage and just finish out their degree program before they move on to their professional program. And I've even had some students come back afterwards and finish their degree program because it's only 1 more year after that, after the fact. So that's an option too. Now, it's entirely up to you what prep degree program you choose. In some cases, it doesn't even have to be in science. Depending on your professional program, you have some options. For some students, this degree program is going to be really obvious. So if I don't make it as a vet, well, I really like biology. Those things match up really well. Obviously, they're related. That's a nice choice. You're not limited to that, but a lot of students do that. Pharmaceuticals, it's really all chemistry and biochemistry. So if you really like that piece of it, maybe chemistry or biochemistry might be a good option for you. For others, there's a less obvious, but still very valuable pathway. So if I don't get optometry, I really like working with kids and developmental barriers like vision problems, but maybe education or psychology might be a good choice. So again, you might need to give it some thought as to what you would like to do or what do you really like about this profession that is maybe available in other professions. In some cases, you might really like the industry, but you don't necessarily have to be an optometrist or a nutritionist to work in that field. Most of these industries are made up of a variety of professionals working together to get that job done. And there are probably roles out there that you don't even know exist that might be a really good fit for you. I myself, growing up, I wanted to be a professor. I'm still working towards that, but I've been working as an academic advisor in education for the last 10 years. And you know what? I love it. It's a really good fit. Didn't know that was a thing. So as you explore your options, you might come across other roles that are just as valuable to you. And in that case, you know, there might be some other options in that field, even if you don't make it to be the optometrist or the physicist or the pharmacist, sorry. If you do choose something else, if you do choose science, most of the courses that are required for your programs are going to fit into your science program. If you choose something else like education or kinesiology, you can totally do that. That's absolutely okay. The trick is not all the courses that are required for your application are necessarily going to fit into the degree program. They'll still be useful. You'll still get credit for those programs. There'll be good learning opportunities and provide you with new ways to think about your discipline and the problems that you'll encounter. But if they don't fit in your program, they're considered extra to program. So they do appear on your transcript. You do have them. They may or may not fit into your 40 classes that you need to graduate with a degree. So just be aware of that. Keep in mind too that the courses you take will all contribute to your admissions average for your application. So in addition to counting towards a diploma or a bachelor's degree at the U of R, if you're unsuccessful in your first application attempt, you can always try again, and you may find that you complete your whole degree before you're admitted. On the other hand, if your program doesn't work out, you've got something to show for your time. Choose something you enjoy and that you're good at, because all of those courses are going to count towards your admissions average. And we know that if you enjoy something, you're much more likely to do well. Yeah. So it's a good idea to let us know once you decide which preparatory degree program you're working on, and this will help us to advise you appropriately and sometimes even give you access to courses you might not have otherwise. So once you know what your prep degree program might be, let us know. We'll include it on your record, and we'll make sure that when we're advising you, we take that into account and can help you choose the courses that are going to be required. So that's the preparatory degree program. Again, keep in mind that some professional programs require full degrees. Some of them only require, 2 to 3 years worth of undergraduate study. I think nutrition is only 1, after which you are eligible to apply for admission to your professional program. So then you want to make sure that you're aware of the different deadlines, application deadlines, when you need to get those in, when you need to have your transcript sent, and those kinds of things. So that will, again, all be available on the website. All right, I'm going to start with my first example. We're going to start with pharmacy and nutrition. And I am going to put these together mostly because they're a solid example of several of the components that I outlined above, and they're pretty straightforward. Again, if pharmacy and nutrition is not your thing, you'll still want to pay attention anyway, because I'll be touching on a lot of the languages and processes that I'll be referring back to as we drill down through the different programs. First thing you want to do for any profession is identify what it is you actually need to practice in Canada or whatever country you intend to practice in, because they'll be different. To become a pharmacist in Canada, you need to have a bachelor's or a doctor of pharmacy degree from a Canadian university. Most programs in Canada are actually offered a bachelor's in pharmacy up until recently, but they're shifting to what we call a PharmD program, or a doctor of pharmacy program. Once you have that, you need to complete a national board examination. So this is the licensing exam that I was talking about earlier. You do need to have practical experience through an apprenticeship or internship program, and you need to be fluent in English or French. Licensing for pharmacy is managed provincially. So in Saskatchewan, you'd be licensed with the Canadian College of Pharmacy Professionals, or the SCPP. And like I said, 99% of our students apply to the University of Saskatchewan. So I'm going to focus my presentation on their admission requirements. But there are actually 10 different Canadian universities that offer programs in pharmacy. You're not limited to any one of them. The requirements might differ a little bit, but the format is basically the same. So we will be talking about the PharmD program through pharmacy at the University of Saskatchewan. And nutrition. To become a dietitian or a nutritionist in Canada, you need to have a bachelor's degree in nutrition or a related degree with specific credits. So keep in mind, you don't necessarily have to have a bachelor's in nutrition to become a nutritionist. You could have a related degree as long as you've got their requirements in there. You should be okay. You do need to have a supervised practical experience, which is accredited by the Dietitians of Canada. And you can find that list of institutions on the Dietitians of Canada website. In the University of Saskatchewan program, the practical experience is actually included in your course for the BSc in nutrition. So that makes that a really nice program. And then you also have to complete a licensing exam. So the Canadian Dietetic Registration Examination and register with the provincial bodies. So again, a few steps to actually license as a practitioner, but we're focused primarily on the degree portion of this at the front end. So I'm going to be talking about pharmacy and nutrition together, kind of as a group. If there's differences, I'll tell you what the differences are, but it is one actual college at the University of Saskatchewan, and they are similar in terms of their requirements. So you can sort of see that as we go through. First of all, the PharmD, this is our pharmacy group. The PharmD, you actually take 2 years or 60 credits at the undergraduate level, so at the U of R, your pre-pharmacy, followed by a 4-year Doctor of Pharmacy or PharmD program. So after 6 years, if you go full course load, you can graduate with your PharmD and apply for licensing to work as a pharmacist. And they have specific courses that are required for pharmacy. Now, I'm going to make these slides available at the end of the session so that you can actually come back and copy it down. But if you are planning on applying to pharmacy, this is your course list of courses that you need to take in order to be eligible to apply to pharmacy. So in order to apply, you need to complete 60 credit hours or 20 courses by April. So that's the end of the winter semester of the year that you plan to apply for admission. So if you're applying for admission for the fall semester, you need to be finished your 60 credit hours no later than the winter semester of that year. And they want to see that you have at least one academic year of at least 24 credit hours. Now, what that means is that they want to make sure you're taking what they call a full course load. And a full course load for them is 8 courses in the fall and the winter semesters. That's not too bad. Traditionally, students will take 5 courses in the fall, 5 courses in the winter. That's what we call a true full course load. And it's traditionally what students will do, but a lot of us nowadays are working towards paying ourselves or paying our way through school, or we have other obligations. We can't always do a full course load. For pharmacy, they require that you have at least one academic year where you've taken 8 courses between the fall and winter semester. And that is designed so that you have practice at meeting the course load requirements for the program when you go into it. Because once you're into the pharmacy program, it's very prescribed and you will need to be able to keep up with the workload. So that's what that's about. Now, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. I'll just touch on the fact that when you look at the University of Saskatchewan website and they list their courses, they will list the U of S course codes. What I have here are the University of Regina equivalents. Please know that we do contact the University of Saskatchewan on a regular basis and we double check to make sure that these are correct. One that we've been running into trouble with is the microbiology course. Their website doesn't actually read properly right now. They haven't updated it. We recently updated our microbiology courses. These courses, Biology 224, 303, or 310, don't appear on their website, but we have confirmed that these are the acceptable courses. So if you're not sure, feel free to contact us at the Science Student Services office and we can confirm those for you to make sure that you're taking the right courses. Now, what you'll notice as you're looking through here is that you will see some courses in brackets. So Chemistry 105, Chem 260. Those are not actually admission requirements for College of Pharmacy, but those are prerequisites for courses that you'd have to take that are admission requirements. So for example, in order to take Biochem 220, which is a required course to apply to pharmacy, you need to have the prerequisite courses, which include Biology 100 and Chemistry 105. So it feels a little bit like those ones are hidden. I've tried to pop them out here so that you can actually see they're not on the U of S list, but they are courses you will have to take just so that you're meeting prerequisite requirements. So there is some reverse engineering that we have to do. Because of the prereq structure and the limited course offerings, so for example, we don't offer all of these courses every semester, you have to be mindful of course sequencing so that you're getting the courses that you need so that you have the prerequisites for next semester when the requirement that you need to get is being offered. So just be aware of that too. When you're planning out your registration, you want to make sure you get those prerequisites out of the way. Now, just to make your life a little bit easier and to show you what I'm talking about, I did put together a sample course sequence for pre-pharmacy. So if you're like, oh, how do I get all these courses in and when am I supposed to take what and when is this offered and what is the prerequisite for that? If you don't know how to do that already, I do encourage you to attend one of our You Are Beginning registration sessions so that we can actually go through that with you, explain how that functions. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to assume that you know how to do that. But if you don't, we do have another session that goes into that in detail. But this is what a pre-pharmacy sample course sequence might look like if you decide you're going to do the full course load. No, I'm going to get this done in 2 years and then apply to pharmacy after my 2 years. Your year 1 fall, you would get some of your initial science classes out of the way, your year 1 winter, the other science courses, and that would set you up so that you can take your Biochem 220 in the fall of your 2nd year and your Biochem 221 in the year 2 winter. So this is what that might look like. Let me see here, there's a few notes. Oh, I just wanted to raise a couple of major points that it's good for you to be aware of. The prerequisites I've already mentioned. Notice that I've put Chemistry 104 and Math 110 in the first semester. Chem 104 and Math 110 actually both have high school prerequisites. So if you haven't taken them, you may need to take other university level courses to meet the prerequisites before you can take Chem 104 and Math 110. So for example, Chemistry 104 requires that you've taken grade 12 chemistry with a 65 or higher and pre-calculus 30. So if you have those things, wonderful, you're ready to go for a semester like this. If you don't, then you might have to take Chemistry 100 or Math 102 first, and that may cause you a little bit of delay. So if that's the case, make sure you get those prerequisites out of the way early, as in right away. I'd certainly focus on getting those checked off. There might be some courses over the summer that you can make up so you can still keep onto this schedule, or you could take a third year and just take your time a little bit, and that's okay too. But just be aware of those prerequisites. And like I said, be aware also that not all courses are offered every semester. So Biochem 220, for example, is only offered in the fall, and Biochem 221 is only offered in the winter. So if you don't have the prerequisites when that course is offered, you might end up having to wait a whole year to take that course again. So again, you want to plan this out ahead of time as best as possible so that you know what you're taking. And again, like I said, you don't have to apply right after 2 years. A lot of students take longer to complete their admission requirements. That's absolutely fine. But that's another good reason why you want to choose a preparatory degree program. So for example, a diploma in general science or a BSc in chemistry that you can work towards alongside, because you probably end up having a few extra electives in place. I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm hoping that means I'm making sense. Of course, jump into the Q&A if you're not sure. I'm going to move on to the BSc in nutrition. Like I said, I'll circle back around to some of these as we go along. The BSc in nutrition is for our nutritionists. They require 30 credits or 1 year of pre-nutrition. And then you apply to the University of Saskatchewan. If you get in, it's 4 more years in the Bachelor of Science in Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan, including those professional practice courses. So they'll actually set you up to be working with one of the Saskatchewan health reasons. So you get some practical application courses in your degree program, which is what you need to get licensed. So it's actually really good to get those in there, even though it does mean that you're doing a full 4 year of nutrition after your pre-professional years. Admission, again, is competitive, so keep that in mind. This is the course list for nutrition. So notice a lot of these courses are the same. So if you're not sure which program you want to apply to, or you want to apply to more than one, that's absolutely fine. A lot of those courses are going to overlap, and you can try a few and think about it, see what you're good at, do some research, and even apply to more than one program if you like. That's absolutely fine. In this case, slightly different courses that are required. It's only 30 credit hours instead of the full 60, so it's a little bit easier in that regard. And again, they don't have the course load requirement. Question that I get all the time is, well, what should I take for my electives? And the truth is, it really doesn't matter. They don't care as long as you're taking something. My recommendation is that you choose your electives so that they fit into your prep degree program. So if you're working on the diploma in general science while you're working on your pre-nutrition list, choose courses that are going to fit into that program that you can do alongside these so that those electives will count for something. And again, choose courses that you like and that you can do well in so that you can keep your average. So just like I did with pharmacy, I put together a sample nutrition course sequence. So you could start with your Biology 100 Chem 104 in the fall, Biology 101 Chem 140 in the winter, along with your English. You've got some flexibility in terms of the psychosocial, sociology and electives. So this is a kind of a nice breakdown where you've got a couple of labs and a couple of non-lab courses to try to make your semester a little more balanced. And again, because of the prerequisite structure, with nutrition, if you're planning to do this in 1 year, I don't really see another way to do this. I suppose you could do both of your psych classes in one semester and have 2 electives the other, but that's really the only flexibility there. If you're looking at nutrition, this is your option. Keep in mind again, though, that the Chemistry 104 has that both that math and that grade 12 chem prerequisite, so be aware of that. But like I said, this program can be completed in 1 year, which is really nice, and then you can apply directly to nutrition after that. Now, in both cases, you need to worry about your grade requirements. So in order to apply to the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the University of Saskatchewan, you must have at least a 70% CGPA. Now I'm going to take a moment just to talk about average calculations. Every institution is going to calculate your average differently, which is really annoying. But what you need to be aware of is that when you're at the University of Regina, when we calculate your averages, we're looking at a couple of different things. First of all, we're looking at your UGPA, and that is the one that you will see when you go to your UR self-service. The UGPA includes all of the courses you've taken at the University of Regina, excluding any courses you've repeated. So if you repeat a course at the U of R, we ignore the first one, we just use the second. At the University of Saskatchewan, when they're looking at a CGPA or cumulative GPA, they're going to include everything. So if you repeat a course, they are going to use both courses, usually. But again, every program has slightly different rules. And in the case of pharmacy and nutrition, depending on what grades you got in those courses, they might count them differently. So generally speaking, they don't encourage you to repeat courses unless you've actually failed a required course. So for pharmacy and nutrition, you might want to avoid that. Or if you're really not sure, would it be in my best interest to do this or not, feel free to come see us so we can discuss those together, because depending on your situation, it might be a good idea to repeat them, it might not. So again, in order to apply, you must have a CGPA, so that's everything, of at least 70%. Now 70% is not very competitive. If you're squeaking in at a 70, you're probably not going to be accepted with just that. You'd have to have a pretty stellar application otherwise. Generally speaking, if you want to be competitive for admission to this program, you're looking at a 75% or higher. So if you're working through on your courses and you're not pulling in those 70s, 75s, but you really do want to go to pharmacy or nutrition, it's a really good idea to contact us sooner rather than later. There are a lot of resources available on campus that we can direct you to help you raise your grades. And we don't just have them for students who are really struggling and on probation. No, if you need to bring your grade up that extra 5%, we can help you find out where your strengths and weaknesses are and help you identify ways to really get that edge that you're going to need if you want to be competitive with those programs. Do not wait until the end of your first year to come talk to us about this. Once your grades start coming in, your averages get calculated, including all of those grades. So if you wait a whole year and your grades are coming in at 60s, it's going to be much harder to raise your average from a 60 to a 70 or a 75 than it is if you're coming to see us, say, after your midterms of your first semester. So don't wait on that. Come see us right away. If you think you need a little bit of help with that, we've got lots of resources that are available to you. Now, I did mention that you need a CGPA of 70%, but when the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition looks at your application, they actually have two different calculations that they do, and they're going to give them different weights. So when it comes to applying to pharmacy and nutrition, and some other schools will do this as well, they're going to apply 40% of the weight to the 60 credit hours of required courses. So the courses that are required get, 40% of the weight is given to those 60 credit hours. So 40% of the weighting is given to the average just in those 60 credit hours. So if you take extra courses on top of that, say towards your prep degree, or you have another year that you apply towards it, 40% of the weight is given to the required courses, 60% of the weight is given to your CGPA. So that's one way we can manipulate your averages a little bit to try to help you to be more competitive, but they are looking at your required courses in particular. So, if you really suck at chemistry, pharmacy might not be a good choice, or we might need to make sure that you're getting some tutoring or the help that you need early on in order to do well there. And then what they're going to do is they're going to calculate 40% of your 60 credit hours average and 60% of your CGPA. They're going to add those together. And then that calculation is used to compare you to other applicants. And that 60% of the comparison, of the weight for your comparison, is going to be on your averages. So again, having a competitive average is really important. One class here or there is not going to make or break you. It's going to be your overall average. So I wouldn't worry about like one class, but certainly if on average you're not getting that 75, come see us. All right, let's move on to one of the tests. So I mentioned that there was the academic piece. That was the part I just passed, the courses and the grade averages requirement. This is one of the admissions exams. So this is an interesting one because this one is getting used more and more frequently. I am seeing this exam appear more and more. on admission requirements. So for even if it's not listed in your professional program right now, the Casper is a test that I'm seeing more frequently in medical school, in dentistry school, and now in pharmacy and nutrition. So that would not surprise me. But I do expect this one is gaining in popularity. So I expect to see it more frequently. The Casper is a common computerized test. It's been required for quite a few different areas, and it is aimed at your non-academic reasoning and problem-solving ability. So they're going to be using your transcripts and averages to look at your academic strengths. The Casper is looking at your non-academic strengths. It's broken up into some different sections, and each section is graded by a different evaluator because these are a little bit more subjective, right? Like they're looking at things like your people skills, thinking on your feet, those kinds of things. These are a little bit harder to evaluate numerically. So they are each graded by a different evaluator, which ensures fairness and diversity when it comes to those interpersonal skills. Now the website that I've listed here, the https takecasper.com, is wonderful. It has lots of resources that explain how Casper works, how to prepare for it. I can recommend that you consider testing on the Casper at least 6 to 8 months before your application deadline, so that you can rewrite it if you're not happy with it, so you can get familiar with it. For pharmacy, the Casper accounts for 30% of the weighting when they're comparing you to other students. So they're looking both at your academics and at your interpersonal skills, and they're using this Casper test to measure those interpersonal skills. All right. And the Casper will pop up in a few other programs. We'll come back to it again a couple of times, I'm sure. And then we move on to your personal evaluation. So for pharmacy and nutrition, they have a personal video interview. So if you think back to the beginning of this presentation, I asked you, what is your why? It wasn't just on a whim that I asked that. This question in some form or another is going to come up on your application interview. They want to know why you want admission to their school. Now, sometimes these interviews are done in person. For pharmacy, it's done in a video format. And of course, for other programs, depending on how this whole COVID thing rolls out, that might become more and more frequent. But interviews is one of the most common ways that they're going to assess your interpersonal skills and your personal evaluations. So one of the best ways for you to prepare for your interview is really explore your why. Ask yourself what you love about it, what you don't love about it. How do you feel you can best contribute to the profession? In order to do that, you need to familiarize yourself with the profession. Right? What does it look like? What skills can you develop that will help? What experiences do you have that might be relevant? What skills do you have that are going to transfer to your role as a professional? You'd be amazed at the skills that transfer from being a waiter to talking with patients. These are things that you can use and that you can contribute to the field. If you have a chance to do some job shadowing or volunteer work or even a work placement in one of these areas, it's not required for pharmacy and nutrition, but it would give you a really good opportunity to get some insights into what you're signing up for. So if you can do that, that is one of the best ways to help prepare you for your interview. Now for pharmacy, the interview accounts for 10% of the assessment weighting when you're compared to other applicants. So you're not going to get the interview unless you make the first cut. So the first thing they do is students are only eligible to apply if they meet certain criteria. Then they're going to take your academics and they're going to compare those. And then they're going to take your Casper and compare those. And then they're going to take like the top 100 students. I'm pulling that number out of the ether. That is not the actual number, but they're not going to interview everybody. They're only going to interview students that they think are going to be serious candidates and have some competitive advantage. And then you get into the interview, and that's what's going to determine whether you get that seat or not. So when you're doing your interview, as much experience as you can bring to bear, that is going to be helpful for you. So just to recap for the pharmacy nutrition, I want to bring it back to those 4 components that I was talking about earlier: the eligibility, academic requirements, exams, and personal evaluation. So for pharmacy and nutrition, for eligibility, you must be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to apply. They do give preference to Saskatchewan residents. So if you are doing your pre-pharmacy nutrition here, if you grew up here, if you live in Saskatchewan, that's going to give you a bit of an advantage when you're applying to this program. They do have seats for out-of-province and international applicants. Your academic requirements, again, for pharmacy, you need 60 credits with at least a 70% average, and for nutrition, you need 30 credits with at least a 70% average. And again, in order to be competitive, really, you're looking at more than 75. There's only one exam in this case, and it's the Casper, which is your non-academic skill set, and your personal evaluation, which is the video interview, at which point they will make their decisions and let you know. So hopefully that goes well. So that was our first example, pharmacy nutrition. Hopefully it gave you a basic overview and sort of how it looks, you know, how these basically fit together. You'll be doing a little bit from each of these, put them together as a whole package, they compare those, and then make their determinations about who is going to be admitted or not. Similarly, as I go through the other professions, you'll see different exams, different interview processes, those kinds of things, and you might encounter those in pharmacy or nutrition schools elsewhere. So just keep in mind that these might be useful for you as well. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about veterinary medicine. Now, for Saskatchewan residents, the college that you would go to is the Western College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. And the important thing to know about that is that veterinary medicine is provincially regulated. And so we can't go to any school across Canada, they won't admit us. So in your case, the College of Veterinary Medicine, the Western College of Veterinary Medicine at the U of S serves Western Canada as a whole. It offers seats for students from BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Territories. And only in the 2021 admission year have they even considered applicants from outside that region. I haven't seen any other vet med schools doing that. So if you're interested in vet med, this is really the school that you're looking at if you plan to study in Canada. Now, the WCVM has an excellent application manual on their website, and I definitely recommend that you grab a copy of that and study it. It is very thorough and explains how they do everything in great detail, which is really wonderful. I've got a link to the manual here, but it's easy to find on their website as well. Okay, so in order to work as a veterinary medicine doctor, you will need your DVM, or your Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. And to get that, similar to the PharmD, you do 2 years or 60 credits of undergraduate study, in your case at the U of R, and then you can apply to the DVM program, the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, and then there are licensing requirements after that. And just like I did with pharmacy, I'm going to make a quick course listing here. These are the courses that are required for your veterinary medicine. Again, you'll notice a lot of these courses are the same as the ones you saw in pharmacy. There's a bit more biology and chemistry here, a bit more math and physics. This is, again, sort of harkening back to that, you need a strong foundation in science. They're going to assume you have a strong foundation here before you'll be admitted into those programs, at which point they assume you know this. So use this time to get really familiar with it. Applicants must complete 60 credit hours or 20 courses by April 30th, the year that admission is desired. A lot of students, I'd say the majority of the students accepted into the DVM program have completed a degree before they're actually admitted. So that's who you're competing with. So if you apply after 2 years and don't get in right away, please do consider applying again. A lot of our students will apply 2 or 3 times before they are admitted. That is totally normal. Now, as of the fall 2022 admission year, so 2 years from now, when you guys could potentially be applying, applicants will have had to have completed at least 2 years of full-time study. And similar to pharmacy, they define full-time study as at least 24 credits during the academic year. So 8 courses between the fall and winter semester. So they will accept that as an academic year and a full-time study, but they do recommend that you do a true full course load, which is 30 credit hours across the academic year. So 5 courses in the fall and 5 courses in the winter. And again, that's to make sure that you can handle the workload once you get into veterinary medicine. So keep that in mind, that they do want to see at least 2 of those. Well, you have to do 2 of those in order to meet their admission requirements. They'd like to see that on a regular basis so that they know that you can meet your admission requirements once you get there. Keep in mind also, veterinary medicine has a requirement regarding distance education, online courses, and you might see this pop up at your professional programs. Distance courses are accepted, but they do require that at least 30 credits or 10 courses are completed in person. So this year, obviously, is a little bit weird because we're going to be going into a year where courses are all being offered online, and we don't know how long that's going to last. Hopefully not too long. But if that is going to be a prolonged scenario, you may want to contact the College of Vet Med and see if they're going to be making an exception for that due to the COVID situation. For now, though, you need at least 20 courses, the fall semester maximum 5. So you should be well within your limits, but just keep that in mind in the long run. You will need to be doing some courses in person. That is, that can be a challenge for students who are studying from a distance, but that will end up being something that you'll have to do in order to meet their application requirements. Okay. Now, in terms of academic averages and grade requirements, these guys break up the scores a little bit differently. So they also do a CGPA calculation. So that's all of the courses that you take ever. Cumulative average of 75% in order to be eligible to apply. But when they're calculating your score compared to other students, they're going to look at, you have to have at least 2 full-time years. They're going to take the best one. And 1/3 of your weighting is going to be based on that one best full-time year. So if you have a really crappy year, that is not the end of the world here. They recognize that, you know, COVID-19 is not going to make life easy for us. Maybe we won't look at that semester, you know, or give it as much weight as we would a semester where you can be fully applied. You know, you don't have school or those kinds of things, or part-time job or anything. I apologize. I'm doing my presentation while my son's jumping around as well, so it's a little distracting. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so again, they're going to take one of your 2 full-time years. If you have more than 2 full-time years, they'll take your best one, which is really nice. And that gets 1/3 of the weighting, and then your overall average, the rest of it is 2/3 of the weighting. So your best year is going to count for a little bit extra, which is lovely. And that creates your academic score, which they then use to compare to other applicants. All right. So moving on to some of the professional or sort of personal evaluations, the Western College of Veterinary Medicine does expect that you are going to be getting some volunteer or work experience in the field before you apply. So this is a little bit different from nutrition and pharmacy, where they want you to have 2 different kinds of experience. And I'm going to define them for you here because they're a little bit ambiguous if you just read. The first is veterinary experience. They want you to see what day-to-day life as a veterinarian is. They want you to understand the profession before you go into it. And they want you to spend some quality time with a vet. So this could be done in a couple of different ways. You could do some job shadowing. You could volunteer in a clinic, or say at the Humane Society, work with a vet there, or some other animal rescue. Or you could be a paid employee. I've had a few students who work as receptionists for the veterinary clinic, but as a result, they're around the vet all day, and they see their work with animals and what they do. So you need to make sure that you find over the next couple of years, before you're even eligible to apply for vet med, find an opportunity or make an opportunity for you to get some experience working with an actual vet. They also want you to have animal experience, which is slightly different. This does not have to be with a veterinarian, but it does have to be more than just owning a pet. They want to make sure that you have some experience working with animals and caring for animals. And this is just to make sure that, yeah, you do actually enjoy working with animals, and it helps give you a chance to develop your compassion for animals, your empathy with them, and your aptitude for working with them. So this could be done in a couple of different ways. Again, you could do some volunteering at some of the rescues. You could, if you breed or show animals or work with people who do, that might be a good way to get animal experience. This doesn't require a veterinarian to be present, but it does require that you've got some active hands-on experience. So those are 2 kinds of experience that they want to make sure that you get. There is no set amount of volunteer work or anything that you need to do. This isn't a quantitative thing. This is more of a qualitative thing. Even a little bit of experience can be helpful. If you're really self-reflective, you know, 8 hours volunteering job shadowing with a vet might be sufficient if you can really leverage that for your understanding, ask a lot of questions, and get out of that. If that's not enough for you, then you're going to want to seek out more. So what you really want to pay attention to when you're, you know, participating in those experiences is, what are you learning from it, How does it relate to your career in veterinary medicine? And how do you articulate that? Sometimes these qualitative experiences are really wonderful and really insightful. You get a really good sort of gut feeling, and then you have to explain to somebody else what you learned and how that worked, and why you really engaged with it, and it's hard to get it out. I'm really bad for this. I love my feelings and all in my head, it makes sense, and then I try to say it and nothing. So you want to practice articulating what you love about it, or what you learned particularly. And I would suggest doing this by writing it down. Do some journaling, maybe write a little paper for yourself. Build your confidence working in this area and talking about it, because it's going to be really important when they go to assess this. They're going to do it in an interview. So this isn't going to be an essay that you send them or a question answer thing. It's not going to be a true false answer test. It's not the Casper. They're actually going to ask you in an interview, and you're going to have to articulate it. So again, you'll be brushing up your interview skills. There are a couple ways to do that, excuse me. There are workshops through the Career Center to actually, practice and develop your interview skills. And again, this is going to be useful regardless of which program you're applying to, folks. The job interviews, just applying for a job, those are really good practice, actually. You may also want to connect with your volunteer or vet supervisors. One practice you could do is like prepare your own set of questions for them and interview them. That'll give you a chance at developing your points, asking questions that are important to you, and get some confidence having conversations about that. Don't be scared to role play with your friends and get comfortable presenting yourself in an interview setting, because this is going to be key regardless of which program you apply to. Now for vet med in particular, they have a structured interview for shortlisted applicants. So they're going to take a look at your application form first and your academics. And if I understand it, for every one seat available, they're going to be interviewing 2 applicants. So they're going to cut a bunch of people off the short list. And then if they have 20 seats available, they're going to be interviewing 40 applicants. So if you make it to the interview process, it's a 50-50 chance at that point. So your interview is where you want to wow them, because that is what is going to separate you from your competition. I hate to think of it that way, but the seats are competitive, so it's important for you to be there. VetMed is also going to be looking at references. So this is you didn't see in the pharmacy and nutrition, but a lot of programs will ask for references. In the case of VetMed, you must nominate 2 referees to support your application. And every school does this a little bit differently. In the case of VetMed, they require that you do have a veterinarian who is a reference for you. So since you're getting experience working with a vet anyway, that is probably a good person to ask. You also need an individual with an animal-related or agricultural background. So your references are very specific here. They are not looking for your Uncle Joe who runs the farm. They want somebody who works with you when it comes to animals, as well as a person, a vet who can actually look at you and say, yes, this person would make a good vet because. Okay, so in this case, what you'll end up doing is you'll provide the contact info for your references on your application, and they'll be contacted directly by the WCVM. It's not always done that way, but VetMed, that's how they do it. For any program that requires references, the best advice that I can give you is to connect with your references beforehand. So this goes for any other pre-professional program, grad school, applying for a job. Okay, ask permission and connect with your references. Give them the heads up that somebody's going to be contacting them. I've had people phone me out of the blue for references for students that, I've met 3 or 4 times, and I can look up the notes, but I had no idea that call was coming. I was completely flat-footed, and I was not able, therefore, to give a really well thought out reference, and I felt terrible about it. But the simple fact of the matter is it caught me off guard. If your references know somebody's going to be calling them about you, they can make sure that they've done some of that work ahead of time and they're prepared when that phone call does come in. Keep in mind too that you want to find people who can speak to your strengths. You don't want a generic reference. That's not a red flag, but if you want a good reference, you want somebody who can actually talk about how wonderful you were. And don't be scared to ask your references, hey, can you provide me with a good reference? Some people might not feel comfortable with that. They probably won't say it that way. but it's always a good idea to ask if they can give you a good reference. And don't be scared to remind them of your skills and accomplishments that you want them to talk about. So if you're like, hey, would you mind being a reference for me? These people are going to be calling. I would really like to highlight these things. Remind those people of what you're good at so that they can go, yep, that sounds good. And they can prepare something. So when they get that phone call, they are ready to give you a solid, positive reference. So that's what I can say about references across the board. Connect with your references, make sure they understand your goals, why you're doing this, remind them what your strengths are so that you're confident when you give that name to the people who are interviewing you, that when they contact that reference, you are going to get a glowing reference from that person. So make sure that you do that work ahead of time. Okay, so quick recap again for the WCBM. We have our eligibility. With the WCBM, all of our Western Canada applicants will be going to that college. So you don't have a lot of options in terms of where you want to study if you plan to study in Canada. If you plan to study elsewhere, that might be different. Our academic requirements are 60% of the weighting to determine who gets in. You must have a minimum 75% cumulative GPA to apply. 1/3 of the weighting is for your best full-time year and 2/3 overall average to create your academic score, which is then compared to other students. And then for the personal evaluation, notice there is no admissions exam for veterinary medicine. They have the interview, which is where they will ask you about your veterinary and animal experience and your references. And together those make up 40% of the weighting to determine who gets in. So things that they're looking for, and I think this is pretty common across the board when it comes to professional programs. They're looking at your mental aptitude, academic performance, motivation, maturity, experience with animals in this case, leadership skills, communication skills, and knowledge of the profession. So that's going to be useful for you across the board. That is what your the people who are evaluating you are looking for. So any chance you have to demonstrate those things, and this is across the board, like this could go on your cover letter, on your application, in your experience, your interviews, those are the things they are looking for. So figure out where your strengths are and try to maximize those, and where your weaknesses are and try to compensate for those. You've got a couple of years to really build and develop those skills while you're here. Red flags, things they're looking for that are going to be like, oh, I don't know about this applicant, you guys, I think we should choose something else or someone else. Any kind of academic or non-academic misconduct, that is a huge red flag. And those often end up on your transcript, so be wary of those. Any kind of misrepresentation. If people find that you lied or didn't quite tell the whole truth about something, that's a huge red flag, huge. They don't want to work with people like that. A prior criminal record, that's come up. Bad references are the worst. If you get that far and they call your references and you get a bad reference, that is it. You're like off the list. So again, make sure you're contacting those references. And of course, you want to be careful that your behavior is always professional and that you're putting your best face forward whenever you can, because those kinds of things are subtle indications of whether you'd be a good fit for that discipline. So again, across the board when it comes to interviews, those are things that people are looking for. And particularly in vet med, they're specifically looking at your knowledge of animals and experience with the profession. So be aware of those. Still haven't seen any questions. So I'm going to push forward. But again, if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. All right, I'm going to move on to optometry. And similar to the other ones, I'm going to go through the different channels, but I'll try to talk about more and more things as we do. For optometry, the only English language program in Canada is at the University of Waterloo, which is in Ontario. And so you will need to move to Waterloo to study optometry, at least for a little while. Now there is a French-speaking institution in Montreal, I believe. I have yet to meet a student. I've been here 10 years. I've yet to meet a student who's applied to that school, but you could if you want to learn in French. That is an option. To become an optometrist in Canada, you need to complete your OD, or your Doctor of Optometry. You need to complete a national exam through the Optometry Examining Board, and you need to apply for your license, again, through provincial regulating body. So, get your OD. So similar to the PharmD or the DVN, it is a 4-year Doctor of Optometry after 90 credits of undergraduate study. So you'll be doing 3 years minimum at the U of R before applying to your OD program. 90% of the students that I've had that have been successful in applying to optometry, and I've had a lot actually, our students do very well here, they usually finish a degree before they get in. I think I've had one student who got in after just his 3 years, and then he came back and finished his degree after, so that was super cool. So that's the Doctor of Optometry, or OD program, and again, it is offered at the University of Waterloo. Similar to the other programs, there is a course listing. Now they list it a little bit differently, and theirs are a little bit wider. So where they'll say, you know, introductory ethics, they don't care what ethics program or course it is, just as long as it's an ethics course. What I've done here is I've actually listed all of the courses offered by the U of R that meet that requirement. So you have a little bit of choice here in some cases, but of course we do have some very specific, you know, your microbiology, here's the list of microbiology courses here. Intro Chem is going to be this one. Your Intro Biochem is going to be this one because we offer one option. So again, this is your course list for optometry. And 75 of those are going to be courses towards your prep degree. So they really do expect that you're working towards a prep degree. In fact, they actually flat out state that for optometry, your prep degree must be in science. So for pharmacy, even my pre-med students, I'll tell you, you can pick whatever you want. You know, if you want to do an education degree in applied medicine, you go for it. In the case of optometry, it has to be a science degree. So keep that in mind. Good choices for optometry. Believe it or not, physics is a very good choice. You will be doing a lot of math and physics in optometry, but you're not stuck with that. Biology, also a good option. Chemistry, also a good option. I've had students do math degrees. Totally up to you, but it will have to be a program in science. And they do require a full course load for a minimum of at least 6 semesters. And that's a full course load, as in 30 credit hours between September and April, 5 and 5. That doesn't mean you can't take courses over the summer. It just means that you also have to be taking your full course load during the fall and winter semesters for at least 6 semesters. They don't have to be consecutive, so summer courses are fine. So that one's kind of fun. Generally speaking, Waterloo does not accept online courses if there's a lab. So if it's a lab course, they will not accept it for distance education. They have stated, however, very clearly, and it's on their website, exceptions are going to be made for the fall 2020 as well as the summer 2020. For sure, they are totally prepared to accept online labs given the circumstances for this semester. And that's going to be decided on a semester by semester basis. So if Canada's still in lockdown by the winter semester and we go online again, I know that they'll be evaluating that. So just be aware of those, that normally they don't accept online courses if there's a lab attached. If it's an arts elective, whatever, that's fine. But the lab courses are not accepted. The exception being this fall, they will accept your online courses for now. So that's good to know that they're already on top of that and thinking about that for the future. All right, those are your grade requirements. So you must have a minimum CGPA. Again, 75% is your benchmark. That includes all of the courses taken, whether they're repeats or not. Now, when you ask them, okay, 75, like, is that enough to actually get in? Is that competitive? The average range for the last 2 years of students who've been accepted is between 79% and 92%. So I would say if you're getting a 75, probably not so good, but an 80 is probably pretty respectable if your other elements go well. But you're also competing with students in the 90s, so quite a range. It's not, your average isn't going to make or break you so long as you make that minimum 75%, but again, you're looking at more like an 80 to be competitive, so be aware of that. And oh, look, there's the Casper again. So they also have a couple actually of exams that you have to do before you can apply for the optometry program. There's the Casper, and like I said, it's becoming more and more frequent that I'm seeing this one pop up. So even if it's not on your list for your professional program right now, I would take a look at it anyway. It might be added to the list of things you need in the near future. So be aware of that. Again, check out that website that's listed there, because that's going to be your best resource to get practice tests and those kinds of things. So there is the Casper test, which is, again, a situational judgment test of your non-academic skills. And the optometry program also has the OAT. So this one is the optometry admissions test, and it is offered by ASCO, the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry. This is their website, www.opted.org, where you can find all the information that you will need about the OAT. Now, generally speaking, in order to, you have to pass the OAT. So essentially you need to get a score of 300 in each section on the OAT. If you don't meet their requirements. There are 4 sections. And this does actually test your academic side. So this is your natural science, is one section. Reading comprehension, quantitative reasoning, so that's your math, and physics. So again, all of these are strong foundational skills that you will be getting in the Faculty of Science, and we'll focus on those areas. Now, they generally say that once you've completed Chem 140, so your intro organic chemistry, then you're probably ready to write the OAT. You can write it more than one time, and they will only use the highest score, but there's a 2-month waiting period before you can rewrite. So if you take the test and you decide that you need to rewrite it, that's fine, but make sure you give yourself lots of time to do that. The ASCO website has the test prep materials and sample tests. You can see what it would be like. There are studies guides available, as well as sponsored study programs. Those are entirely optional. At the U of R, we don't necessarily endorse any one of them. Truthfully, I've seen students study for these on their own, and they do absolutely fine. But if you find that kind of structure helpful, you can do that as well. Now, I did have a question pop up on the Q&A, and it's about the Casper. So I'm just going to go back to the Casper for a second. For Casper, is it a requirement for admission, or is it one that you can do after receiving admission? So it's part of the application process to the OD program. So when you fill out your application and you send your transcripts and everything, you will also have to send your Casper scores. So you don't need it for admission for the U of R, the pre-optometry program, but in order to apply to optometry, you need to submit your Casper scores, and they're going to be used to compare you to other applicants. So it has to be done when you apply for admission. And they do have a specific, I don't have it in front of me right now, but they have a specific deadline as to when the Casper scores must be in at the School of Optometry. So they actually have a pretty nice timeline. And one of the resources at the end, I have a website that has a nice timeline that sort of tells you or gives you some guidelines on when to do what. And that can be really helpful. You've got a couple of years to map this out. I suggest that you do that. Actually get a calendar for planning out your application year when everything is due. And I would recommend doing that. I think that's a very useful skill. I know when I was applying to grad school, I had a couple of them going, and I had file folders and I had checklists on the front of each one. Like, did I do this? Did I do this? When was this due? Those kinds of things. So I encourage you to do that. But yeah, the answer to the question is you do need to write your Casper and send the score as part of your application process. So they will not admit you. They won't even look at your application until those scores are submitted. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. So we've got the Casper, we've got the OAT. And then we have your references. So for optometry, they do also expect that you're going to be doing some job shadowing. Some do, well, they want at least 8 hours, and some applicants do 8 hours and call it done. Most applicants do a lot more than that. And again, this is to familiarize you with the profession. And they do want you to have some experience, and they do expect that you will get a reference from an optometrist. And they do it a little bit differently than MetMed. So what they have are the confidential assessment forms. So these are specific forms that are part of the secondary application, and you will ask your reference for a written submission on that form. So you'll actually take the form to your optometrist job shadow person and say, hey, can you fill this out for me? Now, keep in mind, if you're shadowing an optometrist in Canada, chances are they went to Waterloo, so they're not unfamiliar with this process. So they'll write out the reference, and it gets submitted as part of your application form. They do expect that you will have one reference form from your optometrist, or from an optometrist, preferably the one that you've been doing some work with, and one from, it's called a character CAF, or it could be from an employer, a supervisor, a professor, somebody who knows you well and can speak to your work ethic and how you tackle problems. So workers are really good, volunteer supervisors, ministers, if you work in that kind of volunteer setting. And again, those will be written on the form, and they get submitted with your application. And just so you're aware and you're not blindsided by this, in addition to those CAF forms, so the reference forms, your application form is going to ask you about information about job shadowing, volunteer work, any academic or non-academic awards, and your work experience, volunteer experience. There's also a criminal record check and self-declaration form. So the application form for optometry is actually quite intensive. I suggest you get it early and start piecing it together as you go. Now, I did have another question come in. Do the references have to be only from Canada? Is there any condition like shadowing that has to be within N number of years before applying? Okay, so first question, do the references have to be only from Canada? No. But I would suggest that if you are working with an optometrist from outside Canada, that it's you can at least speak to the kind of work that's relevant to an optometrist where you plan to practice. So you can get a reference from Canada, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that they're, you know, able to speak to your work and what they showed you and what you could learn from them. Is there any conditioning like the shadowing that has to be within N number of years before applying? No, it doesn't have to be recent necessarily, but you do have to explain it and talk about it. And if you had no experience in the last 4 years, that's not going to be looked at with as much weight as, say, you know, I volunteered and job shadowed this other optometrist for the last 2 years. So if you have some experience and it's quite old, that's wonderful, include that. It would probably help your application if you did find something more recent as well, and include both. And if your reference comes from the first one, that's probably fine. But then for your other reference, you want to make sure that it's somebody more recent. So like the person I volunteered with over the summer, you know, those kinds of things. So you can balance those things. If you have a good reference from outside Canada, absolutely fine. But then try to balance it with practitioners in Canada, especially if you plan to practice outside of Canada. Once you get your optometry, let's say, you know, I don't know, wherever. I get a lot of students who go to, like, say, we have international students who study here and then go back to their home country to practice after the fact. That's cool. And if that's your goal, then include that. That's really good information and it can help them understand. And if you've got some experience from that in your home country, that will be relevant to your goals. So if you can express that somehow, that's great. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. It doesn't have to be from Canada, it can be from somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be really recent, but it's probably to your benefit if it's really outdated to maybe get some more recent as well and include both. I think that will be in your best bet to make your application competitive. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so there's your references. Now, the College of Optometry does something a little bit different in regards to the interview process. So what they're going to do is they're going to take a look at your application form, they're going to take a look at your test scores, they're going to take a look at your references, and then if they shortlist you, you will be invited to a meet and greet. So this one's a little bit interesting. It's kind of like a mass informal interview. This is part of their personal evaluation portion. So if you make the first cut of evaluations, they'll invite you to a meet and greet where you will actually go in person to meet some of the faculty and students that are in the College of Optometry. And like I said, it's kind of like a mass informal interview, which can be a little bit daunting for those of us who are not so good at small talk or just, you know, mangling, but they are aware of that, so don't be too hard on yourself. Essentially at this meet and greet though, they're going to be asking you questions about what your goals are, what you want to do. What they're really looking for is your knowledge of the profession, your motivation towards a career in optometry. So again, similar to the stuff I outlined in the interview stuff for VetMed, they're looking at your ability to think logically and clearly, and they're looking at your self-confidence, your warmth and articulation. They want to see if you're going to be a good fit. Do you fit in here? And that's, you know, this was a little bit more interesting because there's going to be several other students there too. So you're going to actually have a chance to meet some of the other students who are applying. So this can be a little bit interesting, but I kind of like the informal nature of it. Rather than sitting in a panel with a bunch of people asking you questions and grilling you, you'll be able to actually, you know, hang out and talk to these people and get to know them a little bit, which is really awesome. So if you make that first cut, you'll be invited to the meet and greet after the fact. So that one's interesting. If you are not invited to the meet and greet, that means you didn't make the cut and you will not be invited to an interview later. So keep that in mind. If you're not invited to that meet and greet, that your application is not being moved forward any further, you might want to apply the following year. Okay, so moving on to the different, just a recap sort of the OAT, or the optometry again. Your eligibility, you must be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to apply. In terms of academic requirements, you need 90 credit hours or at least 3 years of full-time study in order to be eligible to apply. They want 6 full course load semesters, so at least 5 courses in the fall and the winter for at least 6 semesters, as well as a minimum cumulative average of 75% to be eligible to apply. But unless you're getting that 80, you're probably not that competitive. They have 2 exams that you're required to write, the Casper and the OAT, as part of your admissions process. And they have the personal evaluation, so the meet and greet, which is kind of new and unique to optometry. They want to know if you've got some academic, non-academic awards. They want to see the experience again, work, volunteer, and optometry related. That is communicated in your CAF. So once you have those all together, then they make the decision about who's going to attend optometry. Okay, so I've gone through now sort of some of the different professional programs, and what you can see is that they all fit together in slightly different ways, and they articulate their requirements in slightly different ways, but really they're looking at these 4 areas. And when you take a look at the different professional programs that you're applying to, you should be able to map it out in this way and give yourself a little bit of a checklist. What I did put together for you were some resources that are available to you that you can use to help you prepare, and you can come back to these as you need them. And again, we've recorded this session, so we'll be able to put this up for you and send you a link so that you'll have access to it again in the future. For now, I'll just point out that Science Student Services, that's us, we're here and can help you plan for this as you go through. Again, there might be changes, you might not be sure about which program you want to apply to, there might be some special circumstances or questions that you have. We're more than happy to help walk you through that. For those of you who have not attended a You Are Beginning registration days, if you are interested in learning about prerequisite structures and how do you plan out your semesters and those kinds of things, I highly encourage you to register in one of those. I believe we have one more scheduled over this summer for August 25th. Alternatively, we have recorded a previous event from earlier this summer. The link is there. You are more than welcome to take a look at that to help you learn how to do the prerequisite structures and the registration piece. We've also done a couple of other pre-professional presentations. I've got the links there. We did one for pre-med and one for pre-dent. I know oftentimes students interested in these programs have a couple in mind. So if I didn't cover them all today and you want more specifics for pre-medicine or pre-dentistry, you can check them there. Although truthfully, a lot of it is the same structures I just went over. So even if you just look at what I taught you today, you should be able to figure those 2 out. But if you want some more detailed information, you can find it there. And I did collect some resources for College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. So we have the actual college website. We have the SCPP, so that's the licensing body. The Canadian Pharmacist Association, so that's the federal body. And they have a wonderful website on how to become a pharmacist in Canada that breaks it down step by step. You might find that helpful. The Pharmacy Examining Board of Canada, this is the PEBC. These are the folks who will do your licensing exam after you're finished, your PharmD. And then, of course, we have similar links for the Dietitians of Canada. So the college is going to be the same. The Dietitians Canada are the folks that regulate nutrition in Canada. And they also have a similar website, How to Become a Dietitian. That's really nice and sort of breaks everything down really nicely in terms of licensing requirements and exams and those kinds of things. So you might want to take a read through there as you're researching the different things that you need to know for the different professions you're looking for. I do have some links for the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. So it's WCVM at the University of Saskatchewan, including their applicant manual, which I find to be a really useful resource. If you come and ask me a question about vet med, that's the first place I'm going to check because it's pretty well laid out there. As well as the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. And they have, again, a wonderful website regarding developing a career in veterinary medicine and what that looks like and timelines and those kinds of things. So I find that those sort of overall documents from the federal organizations usually give me an excellent starting point to then break down and get more detailed into the different areas that I'm looking at. So do take some time, if you haven't already, to look at those. The Canadian regulating bodies are really good with their information. And that can be a really excellent place to start when you're looking, even if you're looking for like, okay, well, I need to get my veterinary medicine experience. So who are the vets in Regina? You could look at the phone book, or you could actually go to the website and see who's licensed to practice in Regina and contact those people, because those are the people that you want to be, or in Saskatchewan, to be another option to actually see who's licensed to practice. Those are people that you want to contact. And of course, for optometry, we have the University of Waterloo, as well as the ASCO website. There is a WikiHow, and I don't normally direct people to wikis because they're not necessarily, I mean, they're peer reviewed, I guess. But the WikiHow on becoming an optometrist in Canada is really wonderful. That's the one that I mentioned earlier where it has an actual timeline of when you need to do what. It's fun. I would recommend that you take a look at that. It can help you prepare and know when to map out when you're going to write this exam, when you're going to write that exam, when your interview is going to be, when your application deadlines are, those kinds of things. So do take a look at that one. That one is quite good. I was impressed. And then, of course, the Optometry Examining Board of Canada. That's, again, the licensing requirements. So again, I'll make these resources available to you afterwards. If you've updated your name on the participant list, we'll know to email you. In fact, if you had registered for the course, we'll send you an email with this information in it so that you have it available to you. But when you have some time, poke through here. It should help familiarize you with the requirements that you'll need. And that brings us to my slide, which is basically to ask if you have any lingering questions. Myself, Haley, and Kim, we're going to be around for, well, it's 2:25 now. I went a little longer than I meant to, but I'll stick around for the next 5 or 10 minutes and answer any questions that you have. If you don't think of anything now, but later on you're like, oh no, I forgot to ask this thing, that's absolutely fine. You can contact us by emailing us at science@uregina.ca, and then just put your any question can go in there and it will get directed to one of us who can answer your question that way as well. Similarly, we're also happy to meet with students one-on-one. So if you want to take a look at your particular situation or you're a couple of years in and you want to just make sure all your ducks in a row, not a bad plan to just contact us, come meet us one-on-one. We'll look at your application with you, requirements, just make sure you're on the right path so that you have everything that you need when it comes time to apply. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A, and we'll stick around for the next 5 minutes or so and answer those questions. If you don't have any questions, I did a wonderful job and you all understand what you need to do. Feel free to contact if and when you need it, and I hope that you have a wonderful summer and that you're all keeping well.